Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome to my hobby blog. Today I'm very excited to finally be done with a box set. This is a Severin released box set from about half a year ago. I actually pre-ordered it, got it long time ago, and I've just been sort of sitting on it because I've always wanted to do a follow-up video to Volume 1 of this box set series. And which one am I talking about? It is the box set containing many films by one of my favorite actors, the Eurocrypt of Christopher Lee Collection 2. I've been watching this entire set over and over for the last week. That's why I haven't done any Vinegar Syndrome reviews. And now that I'm done with this is a set that I think a lot of people will not get much out of if they don't watch supplements, listen to audio commentary tracks, or even read the booklet. Because for me, this set is absolutely amazing. The film's not so much. And the thing that is the biggest kind of win for me, the thing that I love most about this box set is the booklet. This is his entire career in 6 snapshots, as Jonathan Rigby does. And if you don't know Jonathan Rigby, he is the authority on everything Christopher Lee. Jonathan Rigby, back in the 80s, I believe, first met Christopher Lee, and it wasn't until the 90s, I believe, that he was tasked with doing a full book biography, an authorized biography for Christopher Lee. And this is about 100 pages or so of everything that I wanted to know, personally, about Christopher Lee and his career. I loved this book. I learned a lot. It goes into everything throughout his life. And not only just his films, but also every milestone of his career, such as getting his first international gig, and also his marriages, or at least his one marriage, him moving to Switzerland in order to not dodge, but to get away from the British tax system, because they were just taking everything he had, because he was wildly successful. And I also really like the bit where in the 70s and 80s, he was being hired on to do John Carpenter, or at least he was approached about doing Halloween. He was going to play Dr. Loomis, which I would have loved to see, personally, but I think, oh my god, whatever his name is, oh my gosh, I feel so bad, but the actor who plays Dr. Loomis in Halloween, I think he does a very great job. I think he's exactly what needed to be Dr. Loomis, or who needed to be Dr. Loomis. But they also talked about how Christopher Lee wanted to be, or was hired on, or I'm sorry, he was approached to do The Fog with John Carpenter. Sorry, I'm a little sick right now, but everything about that was great, and there was even a quote by him early in the 80s where he was stepping away from being Dracula, which comes into factor with one of these films here. But he talked about how now he can have all the free time that he wants in order to go be in David Cronenberg films and John Carpenter films, which was a lot of fun for me, knowing that he joked about wanting to be in them because he is such a heavy presence on screen. And I really would have liked him in one David Cronenberg movie. John Carpenter, maybe, I don't know why that fell through, but yeah. There's a lot of missed kind of opportunities that you'll read about throughout the booklet. Those two are just kind of the ones that stuck out to me as a fan of both those directors, Carpenter and Cronenberg. But with that set, or with that kind of cleared away, I'm doing a ranking for this box set, my least favorite to my favorite. And this was a tough sort of task to do because the commentary tracks just made them so much more. I got a lot more out of them with the commentary tracks. So I'm going to do my best in ranking them based on my initial reactions. And I have an entire list here, but the first one, or not the first one, but if you don't know, the films in the set range from the 1960s, I think the earliest one is 62, and goes all the way to 1989, which I'll talk about later. But the films of this set are Uncle Was a Vampire, Secret of the Red Orchid, Dark Places, which has the most awesome cover art, in my opinion, and then Dracula and Son, and finally, technically these are two movies in the set. It is Murder Story and also Mask of Murder. There's a lot of films in here, and all of them are important to understand when it comes to his career, because each of these are important for some reason. Whether it's the last time he appeared as Dracula, whether he just gave up in Britain and just moved out because he had many awful experiences with the taxes, and also of directors who thought he couldn't do a non-British accent, which is Christopher Lee, of course he can. But on to the ranking now. So my least favorite of this set, in my honest opinion, is going to be Dark Places. I was about 10 minutes in and I was already falling asleep. And I guess it should be beneficial to read what the synopsis is, because most of these movies, the plot is not clear. So this is the first official U.S. Disc release, but Christopher Lee, when the former administrator of an asylum, played by Robert Hardy, aka Cornelius Fudge of the Harry Potter films, interesting, inherits the crumbling estate of an elderly inmate, he will unlock a nightmare of lust, larceny, insanity, and several murders grisly enough to warrant an X rating from the BBFC. And the BBFC, if you don't know, has always been very kind of loose with the ratings. They gave so many films X ratings. And you really saw this come to a head with the Video Nasties era, which I think I've talked about before. I won't go in now, but 10 minutes in, I lost all interest. This is very slower paced, a lot of dialogue heavy where the camera is just sitting there, and it was not what I enjoy. And I turned on the commentary with Troy Howarth, who is somebody who I've really grown fond of whenever I see him in the commentary tracks of a release. He's very knowledgeable. He, I think, does 2 or 3 of these films' commentaries. And I could not have watched this without the commentary, honestly. This movie does not have any grisly murders, I'm sure, at the time, which was 1973. Even then, it was pretty tame, and it's kind of shocking that this was given an X rating. But turn on the audio commentary if you're that type of person, because it's going to make the movie far better. He gets into the context behind this movie, and with the type of film called the Amicus films, which I'm not overly familiar with, even at all. But Troy Howarth himself even said this is the lighter of the Amicus films, and there were a lot of issues behind the scenes. But my next least favorite movie is going to be one that this movie is the reason why I was delaying finishing the set, because this was one that took me 3 watches, I guess. My most recent rewatch today is what made me finally kind of go, oh, okay, it's pretty good. But this is the film from 1962. This is his earliest film. It's a German production, which there were a lot of issues behind the scenes between the director and Christopher Lee. And before I get into that, this is the film The Secret of the Red Orchid, starring two amazing actors, Christopher Lee and Klaus Kinski. They are the best parts of this movie. I love the humor throughout this movie, which is very kind of referential to other genres, because you have a lot of the 1940s film noir being kind of broken down in a German context, except it's not really a German context. It's Germans contextualizing the movie in a way that they think the British would contextualize this. So it's a really weird situation going on there. But this is a extortion mob movie that kind of focuses on what the Germans thought Chicago was like, because many of the gangsters in this movie are from Chicago, and the Germans and British who worked on this film, they must have thought that large swaths of America were being run by the mob. And Kim Newman talks about this in his commentary, which I highly recommend. I just finished listening to it. They focus on the source material because this film is based on an Edgar Wallace novel, who is a huge noir crime story author. And this is part of the krimi genre, which is short for Kriminalfilme, which is German for crime story or crime film. So it's pretty not open, but it's pretty clear what the movie is. I thought this story was excuse me, was just fine. I enjoyed the performances a whole lot more. Christopher Lee is great. He speaks fluent German throughout the entirety of this film. And as I mentioned, there was the director of this film absolutely could not stand Christopher Lee. And he said that Christopher Lee's German was pretty awful. And it got to a point, because Christopher Lee is a very professional actor, which the booklet goes into, but he was also very open about his feelings about films. And he said this was probably the worst film he's ever been in, because the director just would not allow him to get his scenes done on time, because he was constantly asking him to reshoot the sequence, do a better German accent, so on and so forth. And it ended with him screaming, basically. Not screaming, but shouting at the director. Which the booklet talks about how he rarely ever did that. He always had very good things to say about most of his movies. He talked about how during this period in the booklet that this was the time period where Christopher Lee was chasing the money. If they had money there, he would act. And that was a direct quote from Christopher Lee when he was writing the booklet. And he said that this was him jumping all over the world constantly. He would film for a few days, go fly to Britain or America or even Asia and do films, and then he would have to go back a couple days later, and he was constantly going all over the world. He was definitely a workaholic, and I respect him a lot for that, but I definitely got a feeling while watching this is that Christopher Lee is definitely a quantity type of actor, where he has really great movies, but for the most part, the movies he's been in are just average. And it's his presence that makes the film better. And I really enjoyed that aspect of being able to contextualize each of these films while reading the booklet. And this is why I recommend those who do the supplements or the booklet readings buy the set. I think it's still in print. And if not, you still need to somehow get a hold of these. They're probably on streaming on Shudder or something. but Klaus Kinski is in this film, and this is before he sort of became known as a troublemaker on set, and he's really good in this. There's even a scene with him and Christopher Lee, and that's it. It's just them two in a scene, and they are so great together. And Troy Howarth, in the other commentary on this disc, talked about how there wasn't really any other meeting between these two. They've been in 4 other films with each other, but they were never on screen together. This is the only movie where they do that, and you definitely see some seeds of what could have been if life did not go the way it did, because there's so many factors going on here. But Kim Newman and Barry Forshaw is the other commentary recorder, and I really enjoyed this one more. I think Kim Newman is a very delightful person to listen to. He has such energy when he's talking. He's so committed to film and to cinema. And him with Barry Forshaw, who is a director of, well, not director, but a writer of many different European sleaze books, looking at Eurofilm and sleaze films and all that. They are great together. They don't have the same kind of snappy conversations as, say, Mike Lita and Arnie, who are a lot of the times on the 88 Films releases. And they're not... it's great. I don't want to go too long on that, but the thing that really impressed me about this film is the restoration. They got it straight from the negatives that were slightly damaged. As they said, it was found in a British vault or something. I'm not sure, but the restoration is just immaculate. It looks so fucking good. It looks very clear. There's not a single crack or crackle or tear in the film. It looks as if they filmed it yesterday and just had it in black and white. And obviously all the actors and actresses are from the 1960s, early 1960s, 62. But this was probably the best restoration that I saw in this set. This looked so good. So that's what I would recommend about that. But I guess the middle movie of this set, the one where I wasn't too enamored with it, but I didn't dislike it at all. This is one that I quite enjoyed. It was pretty humorous and charming. This is the film Uncle Was a Vampire. They cast somebody who was very short, and if you know anything about Christopher Lee, he is 6'5", I believe. He's a giant. And they very cleverly played it off between him and his nephew, who is now controlling the estate of where Dracula, or the vampire, he's not named Dracula in the film, but it's very funny. The commentary track with Jonathan Rigby, who is the biography writer. I was about to say biologist, but that's not right. The commentary with him and Kevin Lyons really goes deep into where Christopher Lee was in his career. This is from 1959. Okay, so this is probably the earliest film in the set. And there's a lot of visual gags throughout this film. And it didn't take until the second viewing for me to realize just how funny this movie was. But the first time I watched this, I did not care for it really at all. It's really with the commentary tracks that it beefed it up, which I know I just said that I wouldn't factor in that, but Uncle Was a Vampire is one that I really enjoyed, and is one that I think could have been better in a lot of ways, but in general, it was quite strong. So, yeah, I really have no thoughts on it. But My next one, my second favorite, well, I guess the third favorite, because I am counting Murder Story and Mask of Murder as separate movies on this list. The next one is going to be Murder Story. This one was great. I really, really enjoyed it. It's about Christopher Lee, who's an author. He's in his 70s, maybe in his 60s by this point when they were shooting this film. But this one was so fun for me because he's a writer and an amateur author comes up to him and is like, hey, you're that author. Can you sign my book? And he goes, okay, sure. And he signs it. And this guy, this fan, is a little too fanatical for him, at least. He's very ecstatic. He's a young, excited, up-and-coming author who wants to write his first novel. And so what he does is that he opens the newspaper and just starts cutting out random stories and utilizing them for his plots and his characters and so on and so forth. And Christopher Lee doesn't get much to do in this movie, but he's a lot of fun in this movie. They even go to a pawn shop at one point, and the booklet even talks about how a lot of people took pictures of him there and were misconstruing why he was there. He was there to film a movie, but a lot of people were like, oh my god, Christopher Lee's a pervert. And he had to go out and be like, no, we're filming this new movie called Murder Story, fuck off. That really made me laugh because he is somebody who nobody, I think, thinks goes to a pawn shop. Not that there's any stigma or anything with that, but Christopher Lee is a very faithful person. He always returned to the same directors. He had a wife who I believe lived with him for the rest of his life. All of that. So, but the issue with this is that there wasn't many special features with this. I think there was one commentary by the co-writers and co-directors, which I did not listen to because I just didn't really feel the need to. But I believe I did watch the interview between from producer Tom Reeve. I can't remember though, so I'm going to pretend as if I didn't. But Murder Story is so much fun. I would highly recommend anybody to search it out. A lot of the Letterboxd reviews were low for it, and I was a little disappointed by that because he's great in it. But they also, to make a oh, not yet. My second favorite, that was my third favorite. My second favorite movie is going to be Mask of Murder. I'm pointing out the text on the bottom. That one was so good. It's about a killer, a serial killer who has a bag over his head, and the eyes and the nose are cut out. And the killer, he is stabbing and killing many young women. And Christopher Lee plays a detective in this movie in a police squad where he gets shot in the first few minutes of the movie, and then he's out for the rest of the movie until I think the end. But if you don't go in wanting a lot of Christopher Lee, this movie's great. The reason why I make it so high, though, is because it's a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed the sort of murder mystery aspects of it. There's a policeman who's our main character. He has a wife who is cheating on him with his partner in the police force. And he knows that they are together but can't find any proof of it. And she says she's going to Bermuda. And so he's like, okay, cool. And then she forgets her bathing suit. That's kind of the first hint. And my only issue with this is that it's a very bad transfer. I believe this is a TV movie. I'm not sure because it is 4:3 ratio. But the transfer is just horrible. It looks like you're watching it on VHS, which I'm sure the movie's elements were sourced from a VHS for this release, because this movie is very hard to find, apparently. They don't talk about it long in the booklet, but they talk about how it was just one of those movies that got lost for decades. And it came out, I think, they don't say what year it came out. Nice. 1988. So I guess it was gone for 2 decades or whatever. But the ending was pretty awesome, although it was a little predictable, which I think is just fine. If you're paying attention to the movie and you're picking up on the hints, it should be predictable. But the way that this movie does it is they tell you outright who the killer is right in the beginning of the movie. And the ending doesn't go as one would expect. And I really like that. But everything kind of weaves in and out throughout this movie. The relationship between his wife and his partner, Christopher Lee being shot and being in the hospital and advising on the murder. The killer's killed right out in the beginning. And everyone's like, okay, cool, we got the killer. But then the killings keep going. And it's really, it's not tense, really, at all. But it's a great little movie. Do not expect much from Christopher Lee, because he was off filming something else. So, yeah. My favorite one of this release, by process of elimination, is the one they spent the most time on for this release. And it's 1976's Dracula and Son, which is based off of a novel from a French author. The nice thing about this movie is that it's great on first watch. There's a really funny bit where a bunch of communists come in and kick them out of their home, Dracula and his son. And they get on, or they're in the castle, and a bunch of communists just show up. And they're having a big dance party, and one of the vampires who's living there, he opens the door, and there's a bunch of communists sitting there. And what they do is they're like, give me a cross. And so they hold up the hammer and sickle, and they go at him, and it works. And it cuts to red, which is really fun. But this movie is very episodic. The first act of this movie is them being kicked out and then going to France, I believe, maybe England. But after that, the second act is them kind of adjusting to real life, because Christopher Lee, he's still the vampire. He gets an acting gig, which is a whole lot of fun, because he's playing himself in real life. And he says in the booklet that Christopher Lee did that. He, the co-star of this film, Bernard Menes, he talked about how he was a huge fan of the novel, and they were looking for the star to play Dracula. And the actor was talking about how they need to find somebody who can play it very, very straight, and also be able to do the humorous bits without laughing. And there was a lot of humorous and funny moments in this movie. The third act is a little lacking. This is when the father and son are chasing after a woman, and they both remark about how they looks like the son's mother, which is really weird. There's a lot of Oedipal complexes going on and incest themes going on throughout this movie, but overall, I really enjoyed this one. This was probably my favorite one on initial watch. And the commentary tracks by Jonathan Rigby and Kevin Lyons was so good. And there's also a commentary track with Kat Ellinger, who is a wonderful commentary recorder. She basically gives a defense of this movie as a commentary. She goes through and talks about all the influences, all of the sort of moments that a lot of people make fun of, but she thinks is endearing. And I was doing a jigsaw puzzle, actually, while listening to it. And there were a couple times where I just stopped doing it and just was watching the movie while she was talking. because it was so informational and I was learning so much. But I also listened to the interview with Bernard Menez, who is the co-star in this film, with Christopher Lee, and he goes into all of the behind the scenes, like what I've discussed with him recruiting Christopher Lee and how Christopher Lee insisted that his character not be named Dracula, and it ends up that nobody had ever named the vampire character Dracula. And so when the movie came out, and it came out as Dracula and Son and had his face right on the cover, everybody was confused because the markets were like, it's Christopher Lee movie, we're going to make a shit ton of money if we put his face on it, so go. And this was the last film that he ever played a Dracula-like character. He said that this movie allowed him to close the door on an era that he hated. He enjoyed being Dracula for the first few movies, but he did 7, I believe. And he said by this one, it was just, he was done with it. And this movie allowed him to play it in a satire-like way, where he really had a great time with all of the scenes and being able to just be himself, especially when he becomes an actor in the movie or a model. Excuse me. And he just has a lot of meta moments. There's even a joke about how tall he is and how sexy he is, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, this is basically my ranking of this movie. I apologize for being sick. I did not plan on it, but I wanted to get this video out. That way I would have something to upload this week. But I would highly recommend this set if you're able to find a PDF of the booklet. If you can't find a copy of this box set, then I would recommend tracking that down. So yeah, really great set. Volume 1 I enjoyed more, but I never looked at the special features, so that was kind of my approach going in with this box set, is that I want to watch as many of them as I can. And it's only one commentary that I didn't listen to. And of course the interviews on the Dracula and Son release, because that is the heaviest kind of feature-loaded film in this box set. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and please have a great rest of the night.